Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not even officially in Congress yet, but she's already making big moves. One of her first big moves was this sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office for a protest for action on climate change. So Ocasio-Cortez sat with the Sunrise Movement, which is a group that's mobilizing young people to help address the climate crisis, with the aim of creating millions of green jobs in the process. Here's what Ocasio-Cortez tweeted out. This morning, hundreds of young people came together to ask us elected officials to act urgently to draft a Green New Deal that gets us to 100% renewable energy as soon as possible. They asked me to join them, and I did. We can embrace the energy of activism to move our party's goals forward. Now, before I get to more details on this, let's check out a video from the sit-in with Ocasio-Cortez and the Sunrise Movement.
I just want to let you all know how proud I am of each and every single one of you for putting yourselves and your bodies and everything on the line to make sure that we save our planet, our generation, and our future. It's so incredibly important. I've shared with you all, and I've shared my story that my journey here started at Standing Rock, and it started with everyday people doing exactly what you all were doing too. It was just standing with the Lakota Sioux, standing with allies, standing with indigenous tribes, because we don't have a choice. We do not have a choice. We have to get to 100% renewable energy in 10 years. There is no other option. The IPCC let us know that. And what I hope we all show is that this moment, and this is the rallying point, it's not just about confrontation, but in a way it's about real, meaningful unity behind our goals. That's what this is about.
That's right.
Now, I can't say enough good things about Ocasio-Cortez and her win here. So, the fact that Ocasio-Cortez now is going to be in Congress and is joining several other Justice Democrats. Actually, I'm going to show another Justice Dem that also was part of this protest. But the fact that she's going to be actually creating policy, and here she is joining environment protesters in Nancy Pelosi's office, the leader of the Democratic Party in the House. This is incredible. So people have to understand that nobody should expect this of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is a huge move. So for her to actually do this, for her to respond to the Sunrise Movement here, the climate change protesters, and actually join them in Nancy Pelosi's office, and she discussed there her how she got into politics, how Standing Rock was sort of the catalyst for her to a jumping off point for her to get become part of Just Democrats and eventually run against Joe Crowley and eventually win her seat in Congress. And she discussed also how this is not just about confrontation, but also about actual meaningful goals behind the protest and pushing for real change. So you need someone like Ocasio-Cortez because she boosts this sort of message. So if these environmental protesters were there just by themselves, they wouldn't have gotten much coverage. So let me prove it to you. Because Ocasio-Cortez was part of this protest, here's some of the huge reaction that she got online from major media outlets. So ABC News tweeted about it. Incoming Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez joins sit-in in Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi's office, calling for efforts to combat climate change. Quote, "We don't have a choice." Bloomberg covered it. Climate protesters, bolstered by an appearance by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, staged a sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office. And Politico covered it. More than 200 youth activists, flanked by Ocasio-Cortez, flooded Nancy Pelosi's office this morning, urging Democrats to act more decisively on climate change. So all of these major media outlets covered climate change today. Something that doesn't ever happen. Even when there's these massive fires in California, the discussion is always about, the people losing their homes and the fires, which of course is also important. But to not connect that to the larger issue of climate change and why this sort of thing keeps happening on this massive scale. So just in the middle of this, I'm going to plug an interview I did with Robert Greene, who wrote a fantastic article in Ricochet.media on climate change and how our response to it should be as robust as our response to a new world war. So check out that interview. I'll link to it above the video somewhere, also below the video. Watch that or listen to that because it really gets into the details about why it's so important to take this climate crisis seriously. Now, Ocasio-Cortez wasn't the only future politician that was part of this protest. So we also have another Justice Democrat winner, Rashida Tlaib. She joined protests outside. So this is a quote from Sunrise Movement, quoted her as saying, "I'm so sick of the fossil fuel millionaires back home who are making my family sick. We need a Green New Deal." Now, believe it or not, Nancy Pelosi responded to these protests. She actually put out a statement. So here's what she released in response to this. "We are inspired by the energy and activism of the many young activists and advocates leading the way on the climate crisis, which threatens the health, economic security, and futures of all our communities. I have recommended to my House Democratic colleagues that we reinstate the Select Committee to address the climate crisis. House Democrats ran on and won on our bold campaign for a $1 trillion investment in our infrastructure that will make our communities more resilient to the climate crisis, while creating 16 million new good-paying jobs across the country. We welcome the presence of these activists, and we strongly urge the Capitol Police to allow them to continue to organize and participate in our democracy." Now, I have to at least give Pelosi some credit here for not only acknowledging the protests, but also saying that the police should allow them to do it. So embracing this sort of protest, because this is what the Democratic Party has to do. They have to actually embrace these sorts of movements, not just ignore them, not just push them out, but include them in the conversation. That's how you embolden new supporters, new voters to come out and vote for your party, because you're showing an actual interest in the issues they care about. But it wasn't the best statement because the reality is this is something that Pelosi already did back in 2007, and the reinstatement of this was already announced a few days ago. So this is the response from Justice Democrats to Nancy Pelosi. "Our response, not good enough. Pelosi is reinstating a 2007 committee tasked with investigating the harms of climate change. We don't need more investigation. We need specific plans matching the urgency and scale mandated by the UN's IPCC report on catastrophic climate change." So, yeah, sort of an empty gesture here by Nancy Pelosi. I mean, look, her reinstating this committee is a good move, but she didn't do it in response to these protests. It already happened a few days ago, as I said. So this is sort of her just kind of putting the message out there again. But when you continue, if these protests continue, these sorts of movements continue and continue to push the Democratic Party in the right direction and push for actual answers, actual real policy proposals to address the climate crisis, then we are going to see real movement and potential bills come forward. So this is just the beginning. Now, I also want to show you, just sort of overall, that the Democratic Party is moving in the right direction. So this story came out today. House Democrats plan to push for $15 federal minimum wage. It's part of a larger plan to pressure Republicans on labor issues. So this is something that we would not have seen 4 years ago, even 2 years ago, when Hillary Clinton was running against a $15 minimum wage. So we are actually seeing real movement within the Democratic Party. And do you know why? Because actual progressives, actual left-wing populists like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like Rashida Tlaib, like others, are winning their seats. And they are pushing the Democratic Party in the right direction. They are pushing them on these issues, whether it's on climate, whether it's on labor, because they see that in order to actually win in the future, they have to embrace these movements. Now, of course, it's not going to be, perfect, and this sorts of policy measures aren't going to happen all at once. This is going to be a continued push because of part of the reason the money that keeps coming in from these various industries like Big Pharma, the fossil fuel industry, or whatever, Wall Street. So as long as that money keeps coming in, it's going to be the pressure on the other side of the Democratic Party trying to hold them in the center, or hold them to the right. I mean, realistically, the Democratic Party right now is a right-wing party. But when you have these sorts of movements, And you have people now within the party, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, highlighting these sorts of issues and bringing them to making them major media issues, where the places like ABC and Politico have to cover these topics, have to actually discuss climate change. It becomes more of a focus. And when it becomes more of a focus, there is the potential there to continue growing that movement and the continued push on the Democratic Party to address these issues and propose real solutions. So again, this sort of thing would have been unthinkable just a couple years ago. But now we are seeing, I mean, from a new progressive in Congress protesting the leadership within her own office and trying to push the party in the right direction on these issues. This is fantastic, and as long as this continues, and I do see it continuing, the Democratic Party will soon be, I think, in maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 years, it's going to become a new party for progressives, for labor organizers, and for real issues affecting working Americans.